Hey y'all, Sarah here with the Instagram account Cooking with the First Ladies for the National First Ladies Library. Since it's National Coffee Day, we should visit some coffee habits of the first families that has almost always been around in the White House. From the beginning of the American presidency and George Washington, who imported about 200 pounds of coffee in 1770, to Eisenhower, who was supposedly drinking literally endless amounts of coffee on D-Day. Even though coffee had been around for centuries, it wasn't until the 18th century that coffee plants reached America, but didn't become too popular until after the Boston Tea Party in 1773, when it became patriotic to turn to coffee instead of tea, which was the case with John Adams. He and his wife Abigail became quite addicted to coffee and said that he especially had at least 2 cups a day. Totally opposite, but also during a different time, is the coffee habits of Barack Obama. He actually really didn't have coffee habits because he actually preferred tea, and what you saw in any of the cups or anything like that was usually tea. The Civil War and wartime also helped to popularize coffee because the soldiers needed the caffeine for energy. But by the late 1800s, entrepreneurs were beginning to take advantage of its popularity and began profiting, including the Arbuckle brothers and James Folger. So to begin at the beginning of the presidential coffee history, Martha Washington had her own, quote, rules for good coffee, which the instructions included a drip coffee that specifically used a tablespoon of specially selected coffee pulverized as fine as cornmeal. The black coffee was to be served with sugar at breakfast and dinner, but hot milk added to the cup at breakfast. So today we are going to make an espresso. So you'll have your little mocha pot here, and what you're going to do is you're going to fill the water up just into the inside little bolt piece. Then you'll take your filter and you're going to fill it up all the way to the top. Make sure it's totally full, but the secret is you don't want to press it down. So you just kind of want to make sure that it's full, and then you'll put that in here. And another tip would be just to be sure that your lid screws on perfectly tightly, really solid. Next, you're going to put this on the burner with the lid open. The inside piece will start to bubble, and when that happens, you just throw the lid on, take it off the heat, and you have a perfect cup of espresso. Now, 2 first ladies who really enjoyed an espresso, Barbara Bush and Hillary Clinton, who also enjoyed a latte in the afternoon, and it was a normal occurrence for the staff to get a call at 2 o'clock saying, time for a latte. Just a couple more interesting White House coffee secrets. Thomas Jefferson was a super fan of coffee, and he once said it was the, quote, favorite drink of the civilized world, and stocked his Monticello home with 60 pounds of beans from the West Indies. The coffee came unroasted, so prior to it being served to the Jeffersons, it was roasted, ground, and prepared, and then served in a silver coffee urn designed in Paris. Another president who enjoyed freshly roasted coffee beans was FDR. He usually enjoyed a cup of dark French roast in the morning with breakfast. But according to Eleanor Roosevelt, he eventually gave up coffee and turned to milk because, quote, he just decided he liked milk better. So also during their time in the White House, coffee was added to the ration list in 1942. So everyone in the White House was actually limited to about 1 cup per day. So even though FDR stopped drinking coffee, he did actually have a secret trick, which was if you dry out your used coffee grounds, then add a teaspoonful of fresh coffee and then boil it, that it actually made a really nice cup of coffee, and of course reuse some of your grounds. So today I am actually going to show you how to roast your own coffee beans. So my good friend Rebecca and her husband actually do the same thing as the Jeffersons and the Roosevelts, and order unroasted beans in bulk and roast it themselves. So I was lucky enough that they shared some beans with me today, so I will show you how to roast your own coffee beans, which is actually way easier than what you would think. So let's pop over to the stove and get started. All right, y'all, so here we are roasting our coffee beans. So you're just going to take your unroasted beans and put them in a large pot. and keep them over medium-high heat. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna constantly stir them. That's the big secret. You want them to roast evenly, so continuously stir. And then eventually you're gonna start to hear a popping sound, sort of like popcorn. In fact, online I did see where some people actually use a popcorn machine to roast their beans. But I'm gonna follow in the footsteps of my coffee roasting friends who gave me these instructions and do it this way. But depending upon how you like your roast, dark, medium, light, it's going to depend on how long you cook them and how dark that you're going to get them. These are pretty close to a medium to dark roast. Again, just listen for your popping sounds, and then from there, you'll just decide how long you want to cook them for your roast. All right, so your final step after you've roasted your beans is to let them cool, put them in the strainer, and then you're going to want to shake them and make sure that you remove all of the husks from the beans. So from start to finish, you have your unroasted beans, roasted beans, and then of course you'll need a coffee grinder for the final finish. Now a couple more presidential facts about coffee. President Lincoln was a very picky eater, but he actually really liked hot coffee and apples. He was once quoted as saying, "If this is coffee, please bring me some tea, but if this is tea, please bring me some coffee." Now, Theodore Roosevelt is actually said to drink about a gallon of coffee a day, but he definitely liked it sweet, usually putting about 7 lumps of sugar in each cup, and he usually drank it out of a mug that most said was more like a soup bowl or a bathtub. Now, he's credited with giving Maxwell House Coffee their signature catchphrase after tasting it while in Nashville, and he said that it was good to the last drop. Now, the Trumans were very picky coffee drinkers. Supposedly, the White House staff had to experiment to find the perfect brew for Bess Truman and came up with one to her liking after she reviewed the color of coffee on the spoon several times. Bess also always inspected the coffee beans and grounds to be sure they were just the right color. Now, Eisenhower actually turned down the tradition of sitting down with the previous president for a cup of coffee during the transition period, and this was between him and Truman because the tension was so high. But again, Eisenhower loved coffee because he drank endless cups of it on D-Day waiting for those reports to come in. Now, Jimmy Carter liked to start his day with fresh squeezed juice and a cup of coffee, but his schedule was so busy, coffee in the mornings and the afternoons often had to be put into his schedule. Now, Reagan usually started his day with skim milk, fresh fruit, and decaf coffee. George H.W. Bush was said to have drank up to 10 cups of coffee a day and was very unhappy when he had to switch to decaf after his irregular heartbeat and thyroid diagnosis. Laura Bush and George Bush would usually start their day at 5:30 with a cup of coffee while reading the morning paper. Laura Bush said they had become so accustomed to having someone else make their coffee that the morning after they left the White House, George started to make their morning cup of joe, and he had forgotten how. Perfect cup of coffee. How do you supposedly make a perfect cup of coffee? Well, according to the National Coffee Association, a guideline to making the perfect cup of coffee not only lies in the freshness and origin of the coffee beans, but also they suggest using filtered water. There's also the golden ratio, which is 1 to 2 tablespoons of coffee grounds for every 6 ounces of water. But of course, you can change that due to the strength and the taste that you like. Now, lastly, what kind of coffee are they serving at the White House? Well, beginning with the Bush administration, they began a policy of kind of only serving American coffee, and so most of that actually comes from Hawaii, specifically Kona Rainforest Farm and their extra fancy blend. Coffee's not cheap though, it's about $45 a pound. So in recent years, it's more for special occasions. So how do y'all like your coffee? Lots of sugar like Teddy Roosevelt, freshly roasted like the Jeffersons and FDR, espresso style like the Washingtons, with breakfast like Reagan, or lattes like the Bush and Clinton ladies. Let us know your White House coffee style. So thanks so much for watching, and next time you have a good cup of coffee, I hope it is good to the last drop. So once again, thank y'all so much, and I'll see you next time.